Live. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Welcome to the regular board meeting of the Valley Irrigation District, June 9th, 2021. If you'll all join me with a pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, you call the roll, please.
Division 1.
Here.
Division 2.
Here.
Division 3.
Here.
Division 4. Here. Division 5.
Here. Thank you. And at this time, we would like to make a formal introduction of our new General Manager, Jennifer Hansen. Welcome, Jennifer. Would you like to make some remarks?
Sure.
I'd love to have some.
First and foremost, I'd sincerely like to thank the board for having the confidence in me to serve in this role. I've had the opportunity over the last week and a half to get to know many of the directors as well as the staff, and the staff has just been wonderful, very supportive. I would also like to specifically recognize Greg for all of the support and knowledge. Yeah, all of the support and knowledge. Greg has been amazing. He has been very supportive, has taught me a lot. He is very dedicated to the district. So I've been very proud of all the staff that I've gotten to meet so far, as well as our customers, and have come to, I think I already knew it, but I've come to appreciate even more how special the district is. It's a very special cultural area. It's a very special geographical area, and we have a very unique and important customer base. So I'm excited to continue on in this journey and look forward to meeting all of the board and staff as well as our customers more. That's it.
Thank you, Jennifer. Welcome. We're glad to be here. Okay, at this time, we will, for those of you that are joining us this morning, I know it's probably an interesting topic. The drought is. If you're joining us for the first time, we'll be taking both public comment at this time from items not on the agenda and then comment on the item itself. If you want to start on your phone at that time, we'll be calling for that. So at this time, we'll take public comment on items not on the agenda. If you'd like to speak on anything pertinent to the district, do so at this time. Start on your phone. There's Laura Barhide. Are you there, Laura?
I am. I just wanted to let you guys know your camera in the boardroom is pointing at the floor.
Okay, 1 second, Laura. We have a little sound problem here. We're adjusting. Okay, go ahead, Laura. Try this.
Okay, I just wanted to let you know that the boardroom camera is pointing at the floor.
Oh, well, that's good. It's working. It's working. Well, our screen shows that it's pointing straight at us, so we'll
I see all your faces, but on the one that says boardroom, I just see the floor and feet.
Oh, I see. You see most of the floor. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Laura.
We can move it in too. Can we do that?
Can we move it a little? That would be good. It's going to reach the end of its cord.
Here we go. Thank you, Laura.
How's that? Is that better, Laura? Are you still there?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I'm still here. Yeah, no, it's still just pointing at the desk. I don't see any like people, but I'll just live with it.
That's strange.
I'm
not sure what she's looking at.
Yeah, it's not what we see here.
It's the camera. Okay.
Now that there's the glare.
Seeing something.
Now we have the glare. Okay. Yeah, so it might be the user's
We do have
camera,
a lot of glare.
but it could be the user's camera, because it's working.
Okay. All right, so that's it. Do you have anything else, Laura, this morning?
She's muted now.
She's muted. Okay.
That was all for me. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Laura. Would anyone else like to comment on items not on the agenda today? Star 9 on your phone, please. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
I move to accept the consent agenda.
We have a second.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. And Madam Secretary, you call the roll, please.
Division 1,
Yes.
Division 3,
Aye, sorry.
Division 5,
Yes.
Division 4,
Aye.
Division 2.
Aye. Thank you, Dustin. Are we supposed to have public comment on the consent agenda?
We should. Go ahead
You need
and
the
ask for
stick
it.
to just whack me on the head.
No, I was slow to that one too, so we're still waking up.
Ricky got me on that one. I go, no. Should we, would anybody like to comment on the consent, items on the consent agenda? Starting on your phone? And after 6 months, maybe I'll get up to speed on that.
Oh, you know what? I have a question about that. It says accept nominations, and did we make nominations for Aqua?
It's in the resolution.
Because I
Laura,
wanted to nominate Laura.
Director Peters has already requested that she become the nominee, and it's in
Oh,
your
it's in
packet.
there, okay.
So you've already,
All right, I
you just
I just see that. I had
Stroke
it
your
noted.
pin, you already.
you just nominated
Okay,
Director
great.
Peters from
Great,
NID.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no public comment on the consent agenda, we'll move on to the first general order, number 6, storage, NID water storage contingency plan. Mr. Chip, good morning. Chip, how are you?
Good morning. Very well, thank you, Board. Situated. Good morning, staff. Board report, staff and public. Chip Close, Water Operations Manager. And today we appear before you to discuss drought and current water supply numbers. Before we dive into the intimate details, I thought I'd give a little bit of history and kind of set the table for where we're at. So if we could, Chris, can you put the PowerPoint put it to the file? And I apologize, this is not in the board packet, but I wanted to give you guys the latest and greatest and most current numbers that we could. So feel free to ask questions as we go along. So,
Can I
next.
give you a sticker?
Oh, look at that. Sure you want me in control? If I may, I'll shut off the lights. Try the middle one, maybe? Nope.
Oh, that was good.
Sorry. The middle one down there, Greg.
5 years, someday I'll get it.
Okay, it's June 2nd, but we know this is as of June 2nd?
Yeah, okay, so thank you for bringing that up. So the data that you're gonna see in the slides is our water supply from June 2nd. And we'll just go ahead and jump right into it. As you all recall, this board declared a drought emergency for NID on April 28th. And at that point in time, we implemented a stage 1 of our drought contingency plan, which essentially was an ask of 10% voluntary reductions from our customer base. It was very prudent at the time. Unfortunately, we have not really realized a large cutback as of yet, and I can kind of understand that. We have had record-breaking heat along with record-breaking dry spell. Not a very good combination when you're asking some folks to cut back on their water use, but that's what we're living. So staff's current concern is that the high demands as well as future state actions will be affecting our carryover, and we'll be going into that in detail in just a few minutes. Then staff came back to this board on May 26th and asked for a budget amendment and the authorization for the purchase of PG&E water. We did get support for that, and that is very helpful. We'll reflect on that in a coming slide as well. So that kind of sets the table for where we're at currently. At that 26th board meeting, the board did ask staff to go back, review our drought hardship, our drought contingency plan, and come back to this body for a discussion for potentially escalating the drought stage. So that's kind of where we're at. Now, where are we at statewide? So when we came to the board in April for our initial drought declaration, this is what the state looked like. Most of the state was in severe drought, small portions in extreme drought. But this is how it's changed since that date. You can see we've really gone the wrong way here. And most of the, up to what, 38% I think of the state now is in exceptional drought. The rest of the majority in extreme drought. So this is not just an NID issue, this is a statewide issue as well as actually the whole west of the United States is in drought as we speak. The unfortunate news is as you look at the 8 to 14 day forecast from NOAA, and this is Their forecast starting June 15th through June 21st, they are forecasting that the probability of the temperature being above average is very high. Somewhere in that 60 to 70% range, we're going to be hotter than average. And then precipitation-wise, likewise, they say that it's going to be drier than average for our area in that same period. Unfortunately, we're at the time of year where we just don't get a lot of rain anyway. So even if this said it was going to be wetter than average, it wouldn't be much precipitation. Essentially, winter is over. Okay. Now, statewide reservoirs in very bleak condition. If you look, focus at the top of that page, and it may be a little bit hard to read up on the wall here. Hopefully, you can see it on your little iPads there. But essentially, the north end of the state, the reservoirs are in that 40 to 50% range, which is very low for this time of year. The middle section of the state, a little bit better at 86 and 84% respectively for this time of year. And then moving on down, you can kind of see the numbers. But really, we need to be focused on the northern part of California. That's really what's going to affect us the most. And it also is going to direct the state on their regulations as they move forward deeper into drought. And in fact, we just heard this morning that curtailments will be coming, and we're anticipating on the 15th of this month. And the anticipation is that curtailments will go back to all post-1914 rights. We'll get into that discussion here in a little bit. So, we're a little bit better than these numbers, and we'll reflect on that here in just a minute. Now we're into our own NID precipitation graphs. I think most everybody is familiar with looking at this, but regardless, the dark blue shaded background is our 124-year average. The yellow line is the precipitation we received in the 2019-2020 year, and then the red line is where we sit currently. Last time around, I added the purple line there for you so we could compare it to 1976-77. But essentially, we are a mere 4 inches of precip better than we were in 76-77, which is the driest year on record for us. So it's very dry out there, in combination with last year being below average. It's a very tough situation to be in. We sit at 50% of overall average. And then, for giggles, I threw in an additional slide. This is what we looked like in March of 2016. I threw this on there just to give you all a comparison of how the current dry conditions compare to how they were in the 2013 through 2016 drought. And what you can reflect upon is that in 2013 and 2014, we had 47 inches of precip. In 2014 and 2015, we had 48 inches of precip. So both much better numbers than what we're seeing this year. If I back up a slide, as you remember, we're only at 34 inches. It's very low. And then in 2016, you can see how rapidly we came out of dry conditions. So, current NID reservoir storage, we sit at 197,000 acre feet, which is 81% of our 8-year average and 73% of our overall capacity. You can see our reservoirs are in a much better shape than most of the states, which is great. However, as we project the usage moving forward, you can see we run into some carryover concerns. Treated water usage, as you recall, at the beginning of this meeting, this topic, I just described that we were in a stage 1 drought where we asked for 10% voluntary reduction. Unfortunately, we really haven't seen it from our treated water customer base. In March, the number was actually higher. In May, it has gone back down. We are actually 1% less than in 2013, so we're getting back on track. That's the good news. Maybe the messaging is finally getting out there. But year to date, we're only 2% under the 2013 baseline. So we obviously need to increase some messaging and encourage more conservation.
Chip, is that 2% under or 2% over? There's a negative sign here where all the others are off.
It's 2% less than 2013. That maybe I'll label that differently in the future, but yes, 2% less than the amount we used in 2013 for the same time period.
Oh, okay. And on the 2014, It was 15% more or
15% conserved. I only colored these red because they're the current conditions.
Yeah.
But all of these numbers you see in the previous years are a reduction.
Reduction, okay. And the 1 and 2 is reductions? as
Yes,
well.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out. I'll adjust the slide for the future. Okay, so as I mentioned, carryover storage is our main focus now. Our 8-year carryover average is 166,000 acre feet. But our minimum for our drought contingency plan is basically 77,000 acre feet. And that's to meet our needs for next year, should next year's winter or coming winters be dry. That will give us enough in reserve to meet the bare minimum of public health and safety. Our initial forecast for carryover was only 91,700 acre feet. You can see that's very different than our normal average of 166, so staff was very concerned. This board authorized us to purchase that PG&E water. That bumps that carryover storage up to 106,700 acre feet. So that is very, very crucial water and very helpful, so thank you for that. But now we really do need to focus on how do we continue to bolster that carryover number and add to it. So this is what our forecast looks like. This particular slide shows us in that yellow dotted line where we would have been had we not done any conservation, had we not purchased any PG&E water. The purple line, or bluish line there, shows where our carryover storage is anticipated with the PG&E purchased water. Okay, so that's great. 106,000 acre feet. This next slide now takes the PG&E purchased allotment of 106,700 acre feet and adds, this is what the carryover would be with 20% conservation savings across the board, and then this is what it looks like with 30% conservation savings across the board. Now keep in mind, this is us simply taking our forecast and doing across the board 20% for the remainder of the year. This is more than likely we will not see this amount of savings, even if we had mandatory across the board a 30% cut. We're just not going to get a full 30%. It'll be some number less than that. But I at least wanted to show you, in a perfect world, if we were able to get full conservation, that's what the numbers would look like. So again, 77,000 acre feet, 78,000 acre feet-ish is our public health and safety amount. This is where we anticipate being if we do nothing else other than buy PG&E water. This is where we anticipate with 20% conservation and 30% conservation. So now you may ask, how does that compare with the last drought we had? I'm glad I asked. So.
Me too.
We are too. So here is the reservoir slide from 2016. And you can kind of ignore the background color because this is without the additional storage in Rollins. But what I wanted to focus on here is the carryover. That's really what we need to look at. And in 2013 and 2014, which was the start of the drought, you can see we were at about 135,000 acre feet. In the lowest point of our carryover is right here. We bottomed out at 129,000 acre feet. So backing up a slide, you can see we're somewhere in between this area, the conservation area. So we're somewhere in between a no conservation, actually we're somewhere in between 20% and 30% conservation if you compare us to the last drought. Okay? So, I know this topic is to talk about the stages of the drought contingency plan. That's definitely something we can go over. However, given the current conditions, staff has kind of come up with a little bit of a hybrid approach. We don't feel like the stages in the drought contingency plan really mirror everything we would like to do, or give us all the tools that we need. And we're really looking forward to, once we get through the ag and urban plan, to pull this drought contingency plan back out and do it forward. Having said that, though, staff's current recommendation is kind of a hybrid approach with our current drought contingency plan. What you're going to see here is these are the recommendations for each of our water groups, so our treated water customers, our irrigation water customers, and then our own district action. Next to each descriptive item, you'll see in parentheses a number, and that is what drought stage it relates to, that particular line item. So I'll walk this through. Our treated water customers, staff is recommending we do mandatory reductions of 20%. That is from stage 2 of our drought contingency plan. We also recommend implementing drought pricing at stage 2 levels, which would be a 25% increase only in the volumetric rate, not the base rate. And then we are asking to limit outdoor watering to every other day for a maximum of 3 days per week. That is also a stage 2 drought contingency plan item. And I should also add that even though not all the details may be on this slide, we would also implement all the other items within the drought contingency plan for that stage. For our irrigation water customers, we are proposing no new or increased water sales. And this is where I don't think the drought contingency plan fits our needs anymore. As you can see in the parentheses, that is normally a stage 4 item. However, we're at a point where we're asking people to voluntarily conserve. We spent nearly $1 million to bolster our own supplies. I'm struggling a bit with the fact that we continue to add new customers on when we're telling everybody else we don't have the water, we need to cut back. So staff feels like it's appropriate to put a freeze on irrigation water, new irrigation water sales. Additionally, staff is recommending no fall water sales for the coming fall water season. That is a stage 3 drought contingency plan item, but really it's based upon the district's rules and regulations. If you dig into our rules and regulations and you review fall and stock water, it's item 5.01.06. The definition of fall and stock water is a service available during the period from October 15th through December 1st, both dates inclusive. This service will only be provided when and where the district has available water and is secondary to seasonal or demand water. So by our rules and regulations, this is not a guaranteed supply. It never has been. And so staff recommends that's something we cannot make available to the customer base this year, unfortunately, given the current water supply numbers. I can also add that the demand for fall water in the past has not been high at all. In fact, you go back to 2014, we really only had a handful of customers up until 2020. Now, last season, we had 137 customers. The demand for fall water has really exponentially risen. And the other challenge with fall water is that because we have received no rains or precipitation at that time of year, every drop of water we're supplying to our customer base at that time of year is coming directly out of our reservoirs. So it directly affects our carryover storage. Those numbers I provided you in our carryover storage do not include winter and fall water. That is simply just the end of summer carryover. So any additional sales we make in fall and winter will be deducting from it. Okay. Limit water sales to existing customers. Limit winter sales to existing customers. So in the winter months, we have a handful of customers that utilize our water year-round. The fortunate thing is that, generally speaking, they have a decent allotment, a high allotment of water in the summer for irrigation purposes. In the winter, most of those customers cut back to 1/2 of an inch, and they're using it for in-home purpose, not for drinking, but for bathing, cooking, things of that nature. So not a huge demand there. We are proposing that we continue to supply those customers for public health and safety reasons, but no new.
How many winter sale customers do we have? Last time we talked, I understood it was not very many.
It's right around that 1,000 number.
Oh, that's higher than I thought, okay.
But volume-wise, it's not a lot of water. Again, because most of them are very small allotments, 1/4 or 1/2 an inch.
And is it all for in-home use as opposed to agricultural use?
I would say a majority of it is in-home use. There's going to be some that use it for stock water, for filling, water bays for the livestock and whatnot. But a great majority of it is in-home use. These canals travel to some very remote locations. This is the only way that these folks have to supply their home with water.
Right.
For drinking and other purposes, they have bottled water. But, for flushing toilets and things like that, they use the canal water.
Does that mean that our canals would be running dry then, with a scenario, you know, we have, like, I'm on Campfire West Canal and another smaller canal, and both of them have historically run year-round. So does that mean you would run them dry?
So because what we're proposing keeps existing customers in water, basically the canals that have remained wet during the winter will remain wet, because we're not going to cut off those folks. We're only proposing to limit new water sales, no new customers in the winter. Now, I should add to that, that's a great question about the canals. There are certain canals where we have no year-round use, so we do dry those up. And we do that purposely because sending water down those canals is pulling from storage.
Right.
It's essentially a waste of water. And where we have canals that have historically been dry, we don't offer fall or winter water sales on those canals, because they're, again, it is increasing the use at a time when we're pulling directly from storage, and staff feels like we just don't have that water available.
Right.
And then also for our irrigation water customers, we would propose an implementation of drought pricing at stage 2 levels, which is 25%. Obviously, we're a portion of the way through the season already, so that would have to be prorated a bit, in my opinion. Basically, at stage 2, 25%, what you're talking about is an addition of basically $42 per miner's inch if you do 25% from the remainder of the season. Okay, and then last but not least is a proposal to terminate the irrigation season early. Now, this is a little bit of a controversial topic. We have reached out to the ag community, and we've gotten a lot of feedback. They're really great to work with. They understand the issue at hand. They want to help us. But this is a bit of a challenge. What we have found out is that folks who do irrigated pasture and have perennial grasses, things like that, they actually prefer to have as much water as possible through the season, and it's less harmful to them to stop early. However, there is a whole nother customer base, ag customer base, the veggie folks, the tree folks, the grape folks, they need the fall water. Mm-hmm. So it's a challenge for us to find a solution that works for everybody. But if we propose to cut it off October 1st, that essentially is splitting the difference. If we actually got 20% savings, we'd be stopping the season September 15th. I realize that's an extreme hardship for most of our irrigation customers. It's still hot, still dry, it's September. We feel like if we do a hard cutoff October 1st, a couple things are in our favor. One, the days are shorter, the nights are cooler. Hopefully we have some rain by then. I'm going to do a lot of rain dancing, fingers crossed.
Do you still have the video of Delta doing that?
No, but we do have a still of it, so I may bring that back. So we're hopeful that that difference, essentially we'd be getting 10% cut back from doing that. And so we're going to continue to work with the ag community, though, and get their input on some of these processes. This might be a good time to talk about, well, let me finish the rest of this slide first.
Chip, can I ask you a question on the irrigation water? So we don't, in the treated water, you say mandatory reductions of 20%, but in the irrigation water, we don't explicitly call that out that I can see. We implement pricing changes, but we don't mandate the 20% reduction.
Well, and that is where the last line item would come into play. So terminate the irrigation season early is a hard cutoff. It's off. There's no water available. Unfortunately, if I do it October 1st, you're really only getting about 10% mandatory cutback. We're hopeful that the drought pricing will encourage folks to call in and voluntarily cut back, and we'll get the rest of the 10% from that. I can say that, as we mentioned earlier, we have sent out a mailing directly to all of our customers asking for voluntary cutbacks. Those are starting to trickle in, slowly but surely. We have to date received 28 of those back, and we have cut back 43 miners inches for a total of 262 acre feet. So it's slowly picking up, but yes, The ag irrigation water, really, the mandatory part of it is only about 10%. Now, the treated water, folks, we asked for a mandatory 20% reduction. However, there is no way to just completely shut off their water and get 20%. Essentially, we're just asking for them to do it. And the only enforcement stick we have is fining. So they can still use all the water they want, they're just gonna pay a heavy fee. Or a fine. That's the difference.
Yeah. You know, in looking through the drought contingency stages, one of the things that, and I know we've talked about this before, is that we're buying water on the irrigation water side 24/7 for that whatever period, 6 months. But we're actually, most users are not using it that amount. And so I kind of struggled with the, we're buying something that you're not using, and then you're cutting back when you're already not using.
Right.
So anyway.
Fair point. So in that list I just told you, we had 28 customers cutting back 43 miners inches. There's a decent likelihood that those folks weren't utilizing that full allotment anyway.
Right.
It's hard to control that, and it's hard to know what that number truly is, and that's why our distribution operators are so important to be real-time monitoring the system. And they are really struggling this year. We are keeping the canals as low as we can at the ends, and in fact, getting a lot of calls based on that. But it's part of our due diligence to be as efficient as possible.
Yeah.
And one of my constituents said that agriculture customers don't over-irrigate, they over-purchase.
Right. Right.
So we've had this discussion numerous times about that issue, and of course, my take is the water's not running over the spillway going to the river, maybe some end of a couple of canals, but all around us it goes back into Rollins Reservoir, for instance. So there is that, but you know, I think the more important thing is not that that's not important. That is important that we move towards figuring that out. Rick Transon.
So we cut back the amount we purchase by 1 miner's inches, but we're not planting a certain area. So that's also happening where farmers are adjusting to the realities of the water supply.
Yeah. And by us patrolling this canal system, those folks who are not using as much water, hopefully we catch that at the tail end and we're able to cut back the canals. I say in real time, we're out there every day monitoring this, but keep in mind it takes a few days to get water from the top of the system to the end. So you can't just snap your fingers and cut back 10 inches at the end of that canal. It has to start way at the top. A lot of times, by the time that cut makes it to the end, now you're chasing your tail and having to put some back in. So it's a fine, balancing, delicate act. So we're doing the best we can given the circumstance, and we're really focused on keeping the minimal amounts that we can without shorting customers.
Just, as you know, in my division, most of my farmers that are in Division 1 are the smaller organic farmers that are doing vegetables and row crops, and for the most part annual. And in talking with several of them over the last week, it's been posed, and I think there's several of them on the line, that, well, what if we, change our orifice size, right, to be whatever, if they're getting 5 inches now, they change it to 4 inches, or, some sort of something that will show like a 20% cutback. But then for them to have the water not be cut off at a hard cutoff date, because for them, it is dry in October, and folks are making planting decisions right now about, what are we going to do? And so I guess my question then is it possible for some crop types to have water beyond that October 1st by changing orifice size now, thereby achieving this reduction so that they can have the water longer?
Yeah,
Is that a possibility?
that's a great question, and it's one I was going to get to.
Sorry.
But that's okay. Let's jump into it now. So the problem we have with that, or the challenge we have with that, is that The benefit of stopping the season early, say October 1st, you have the ability then to shut off the canals, and you save every drop. If we have a select handful of customers on those dry canals that still need water that last 2 weeks, now we're wetting up the entire canal system, having to pass the tailwaters at the end to make sure they have enough, and we're really not realizing the savings, because we're still having to wet up the entire system.
Well, what I was wondering about that is, you know, look at canal by canal, right? And so some of them are, some of these farm operations are more on one canal, say, than another. And I don't know, maybe Rich can talk about this, but, you know, there are some canals that have a much higher use of farmers or like cattle ranchers with perennial grasses that, you know, we have heard that, well, they'll probably be okay if we cut this off October 1st. And so whatever that canal is could be lessened or whatever. I'm just wondering if there's a more micro way to look at this to hurt the fewest number of producers.
I believe there's always a way to look at those types of things. However, my concern is that we won't get the savings we're truly after. That's my concern. I should add that, excuse me, had we known we would be in this position at the beginning of the year, we may have handled this very differently. We may have just reorificed everybody at the beginning of the season and just cut everyone back. But because that ship has sailed, there's no way we can go back out and do 5,000 irrigation boxes, get them all reorificed in time to make a difference before the end of the season. I could throw the entire staff at it, it's still gonna take me a month to get it done. In addition to the cost, we estimate around $500,000 to do that. And so, not an easy task and not one I think we have enough time to implement.
So then my head goes to a hybrid. Like, well, I wonder if we have enough time and staff and resources that we could take those canals where, like I'm describing, these different kinds of food producers that are not ranchers, and I'm not picking on ranchers, everybody, I'm just looking at water usage, where we could reorifice some of those boxes
Yes.
to achieve that savings.
That is-
I get it, we can't do 5,000 of them between now and, you know, August 1st, but maybe we could do a few hundred or 500. I mean, I don't know, you'd have to tell me what you thought we could do.
That part is not a challenge. We could definitely easily do that. The challenge remains that we are essentially, by doing that, we are essentially taking a canal that normally would have been dry and now putting water in it for additional 2 weeks. We're getting the water loss from having to wet up miles of canal. We're getting water loss at the tail end of that canal because we have to make sure that those particular customers who are still on have enough head pressure, and to do that, you have to have extra water in the system. So what I'm trying to convey is that all of those things are doable, but the most conservation and the mandatory conservation measure would be to just shut the canal off.
So,
No, then my last question is, in light of the curtailments that we know are going to be coming from the state, is what you're proposing in the hybrid align with what we think we're going to get from the state?
So our concern for the curtailments are that essentially the runoff has stopped, all right? There's not a lot running off into the system anymore. We're already pulling from storage. So abiding by the curtailments for now won't be a huge challenge for us. The concern comes in the fall and winter. When the rains hit and those curtailments remain in place, we now won't be able to capture those flows until the state releases the curtailments. That is that time period we're discussing right now, the critical time period. Last time around, the state was very slow to lift the curtailments. In fact, we had multiple storms and runoff had begun, and we didn't get a lifting. So we're very concerned, and we were going to propose this on. That is a remaining concern. I will say the state also mentioned today in their, it wasn't really a briefing, it was just a call that we had, that they do anticipate going into pre-1914 rights later this summer. So stand by, it's coming.
Kind of terrifying.
Yeah. Again, won't be a great effect to us this summer because runoff has stopped essentially. There's a few locations where it'll hurt us a little bit, but really, again, the focus is going to be in the fall and winter.
Yeah, I want to emphasize that point, that a curtailment is really of a direct diversion. So So if there's water coming into your system, you cannot divert it. But by the time the 15th rolls around, even right now, or August, by the time pre-14 curtailments roll around, we're diverting from storage. And a curtailment does not affect diversions from storage.
Okay, well, that's good to
So the
know.
water that's currently in storage has already been diverted. You're free to continue your operations even in light of a curtailment.
So it's not a curtailment of our delivery, it's a curtailment of the diversion.
Yes.
Correct, yeah.
And we will start, since you're at the top of the system, we will start diverting to storage again as soon as those storms come. So that's why, October, November time period, lifting the curtailment is really the big issue for NID. And last time we worked with the State Water Board, we ended up using some regulatory storage and, other opportunities, but we'll need to engage in discussion with them about making sure we don't miss a storm event. Because again, at the top, if you're down in the delta and you're curtailed, it doesn't hurt you too bad because you're at the bottom of the system. But when you're at the top of the system, you've really missed an opportunity to store water that you otherwise would have captured. And that could be the only significant rain event for a period of time. So you really want to be cautious about operating your storage system in the fall.
Director Johansson?
Yeah. Chip, thank you for your efforts on this, because I know it's not easy. Yeah, this is a hard one. So I'm going to support Ricky in what she has just laid out as, but bring it maybe another angle to it. We have a lot of young, very talented farmers and ranchers that are here because of the water, because of efforts that have been decades long to encourage young farmers to come here. And I've always seen it as a public health and safety issue on food security, because in the valley, things are going sideways and they're going south in a heartbeat. A lot of farmers in Marin, north of San Francisco, are not farming this year. So there's talk in some of the trade papers of food shortages. So I look at a lot of our specialty truck farmers as our local food security supply. And if they don't get the water they need to complete their crops, then we don't get the food that the community needs. And these guys can just walk up and go somewhere else. And over the past few years, we have trained a lot of these young farmers who have left. We need to keep everyone we have. So I guess I'm asking, is there a hybrid in which the directors can get busy, find out what canals are live after October 1st?
That's my question.
Yeah,
And who lines up, who's farming on those canals? Because I've been told one farmer said, hey, I can plant less now and do with 40 or 60% of the water allotment, but I need to go longer in the season to make sure those crops come in. Are we getting close to some compromise here or some way to collaborate?
So I hear you. I would hope that those farmers that are relying on water the last 2 weeks of that season are also winter water customers, because I can't imagine that, and forgive my ignorance, can't imagine that you would rely on the last 2 weeks knowing that's all you needed.
Right.
So I would imagine if you're reliant upon water for a winter, fall type crop, you would also be a winter water purchaser, and those folks we are proposing to remain whole. I could be wrong.
That's an interesting.
The harvest comes in November, end of October, November, so no, they wouldn't be a winter customer.
So Rich, if you don't mind me asking, how are they getting water after October 15th?
Well, that's all they need. They had water till October 15th. Their crops are made.
Okay.
right.
You're talking the 2-week period we're talking.
Yeah, we're just talking 2-week period for these people, but they would take less water now and eke it out longer.
Right. That was the whole thing about the orphan
So
changing size.
what we've done is we put on-site storage so that we'll boost up and pump out of that storage, and it will get us through that 2 weeks. It'll get us through maybe longer if we get any rains and runoff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But a lot of these guys don't have on-site storage.
They do not have on-site storage, which is not our responsibility as an NID, but it's something that as a community, we need to start looking at, boosting our on-site storage. So when we, as a irrigation district, comes to these problems, everybody's kind of has their storage independent of our supply.
Yeah.
And Chip, this is probably a good time to bring up what are one of staff's proposals that we've been kicking around, and I've spoken with some of the directors regarding, is reframing the Drought Hardship Committee. Currently, the Drought Hardship Committee is set up to be an advisory committee to the board to eventually approve or disapprove hardship waivers for these reductions.
On the cost side?
It's
No, on the water side. Okay,
correct.
that's what I just wanted to get it.
And it's, well, currently it's delivery side. One of the things that staff has been discussing is that we do feel that there could potentially be some long-term legal implications of conflicts of interest associated with this drought hardship. With that said, I 100% agree with what is being stated. There are some really complicated technical issues that are very specific to different types of agricultural activities. And as a district, I think it's imperative that we dive deeper into this issue and understand what are these little nuances based on specific crop or activity type. We just this week met with a subgroup of representatives from the Agricultural Committee, but it was not the waiver committee that is appointed by the director. So it's by the directors. What staff is proposing is that we reimagine the waiver process and instead engage those folks that were, one, appointed by the directors, as well as the representatives from the farm bureaus in the county, and pull together this group that will then come back and provide some hardship considerations through a framework that would be basically applied equally or on a crop-by-crop basis that we would then present to the board the next time we come together and we present the actual revisions to the water shortage contingency plan. So we had talked with the smaller subset group this week about that concept. And at first there was a little bit of apprehension, I would say. And then I think as folks talk themselves through it, I think that they themselves realize that there are some inherent conflicts of interest with the hardship waiver committee and kind of approving or recommending waivers on a person-by-person or customer-by-customer basis. So we wanted to propose that to the board to essentially reimagine the Drought Waiver Hardship Committee and instead utilize that same group of people in addition to the farm bureaus and the smaller subset group to kind of come up with this framework that is more objective as opposed to numeric, that we can take into consideration all of those issues and see what we can come up with. Because you can address hardship on a water delivery basis or on a financial basis. And so we really want to kind of flesh that out more because, as we know, I think that we all realize droughts are going to become more normalized in our lives. And so I think it would be prudent to start having these discussions now. One of the things we did hear kind of loud and clear from the group and is that this year, as Chip referenced, we're already kind of down, we're already down the canal, right, as far as drought goes. We really need to kind of start putting more thought into next year and future years so that people aren't wasting money doing things that may not come to fruition at the end of this season. So we did want to get some input from the board regarding that proposal. And then what would eventually happen is, and we're hoping to do this in very short order, we would, based off input received today, make some revisions to this hybrid proposal, hopefully develop this committee that kind of comes up with this hardship framework, and then bring that back to the board in a formal public hearing so that we can make some formal resolutions or revisions to the contingency plan.
I like that idea. I guess my concern is the immediacy of the problem. And again, for a lot of the veggie folks and the row crop folks, they have to know like today, tomorrow. I mean, it's like we can't wait like 3 weeks for several committees to make recommendations about this, that, and the other thing. It's got to be just done. And I don't know how you do that.
We already have our next meeting scheduled for next week, and then.
Do you have a meeting with our?
We don't. That's where we would
Oh.
have to make that outreach based off of input we received today, and we would do that this afternoon.
And I think, correct me, Dustin, you might know better, but there has to be a public hearing on these activities, and so that's a 2-week notice in and of itself. So we do have some parameters that we're kind of having to work within as
Legal
well.
parameters.
Right. Can't just,
Speaking of legal, Dustin, if you would chime in on what Jennifer alluded to about the potential conflicts of interest creating
Yeah, I think
a scenario that we would not.
it's fact dependent, right? It's fact dependent. One person may not have a conflict, and yet another appointee may. So it's gonna depend on who the people are, and I don't know them, so I'm speaking hypothetically. But it's a legitimate concern when you have a committee that's authorized to investigate these pretty significant weighty decisions and then make a recommendation. You wanna make sure that they're, not operating with a self-interest. So it's a legit issue, something we need to look at.
But all farmers have are operating in their self-interest. I mean, you can make that argument, right?
Well, in every landowner in the district, including all of you, right? I mean, so there's a line here.
Yeah,
and-
but, I mean, the effort on the board is, I believe, is to try and do the best we can to preserve our agriculture and to do the least harm with the most preservation. And so, yes, everybody's gonna have a self-interest in doing that.
So my question is, in your opinion, would this process that Jennifer's outlining of not letting the committee, not letting the hardship committee make the final decision?
They don't.
But having the staff make the decision, then bring it, does that separate the conflict of interest out of that?
Yeah, I think it helps. We've got some more work to do, and this will be presented to you. I don't know, Jennifer, if you're thinking that's packaged in our resolution, or if this is a separate resolution, or what vehicle is used to create or define the parameters of the committee. But there's work that needs to be done on kind of properly packaging it, presenting it to you, and then
I think as long as the hardship committee isn't making any recommendations on any specific customer and is more focused on customer type classes, I think we're in a better space. It's really when you start having this appointed committee that also may be applying for hardship or may benefit from denying a hardship waiver, is where you can cause some issues. But I don't, Dustin and I haven't really fleshed this out together. I don't believe there to be a large conflict in them providing input or a recommendation for approval of this overall framework that they are then not applying on a customer-by-customer basis.
Well, I certainly like that idea.
Yeah, certainly from staff's perspective, we don't want to, the more blanket it is and treats everybody black and white and evenly, the better off we are.
And so then my last little comment is, since, I really want this to go as quickly as possible, would we as a board be willing to have a special board meeting? So you've got staff works on the recommendations, and you bring in the farm folks and the growers, and they participate, and if it doesn't align with the board meeting for public hearing, can we do something separate so that we can, forward this more quickly than waiting?
I think we always, and I don't want to speak for others, but I think we anticipated that due to the timeliness of this, it would probably be a special meeting at some point in time.
Okay.
Once we got the conservation plan all packaged up, the resolution all packaged up and ready to go, it may not meet with our regular board schedule.
Right.
If it just so happens that way, then potentially that's a special meeting. If not, if it conveniently fits in with the schedule, great.
Now, the hearing requirements are associated with the drought contingency plan, correct? Are they also associated with the waiver committee?
no.
No, so we could essentially bring forward any recommendations from the committee forward in a special meeting and then follow up in a regular meeting with a revision of the drought contingency plan. Given that we have 2 weeks of public noticing for the public hearing to modify the drought contingency plan, I think it's going to end up naturally aligning itself for the next meeting. We do have a commitment from the agricultural folks. They are very committed to ensuring that they provide input on a timely basis and have said to staff as well as to the small subcommittee that they're dedicated to this cause. And we have our next meeting with a smaller group on next, what was it, Wednesday, Tuesday, and then we would reach out immediately to the folks that were nominated by each one of the directors to also participate in that as well. So staff is hearing board direction loud and clear. This needs to be done as soon as possible. I do think, just from a timing perspective, that it is looking like that would hopefully line up with the next meeting. Do we meet the noticing requirement? I say that without looking at a calendar.
If it's an emergency meeting, isn't there, the notice requirements have to be 2 weeks?
So we're getting into the weeds here, but.
Help me with that. I know. Well, I just want to make sure we
Yes,
doing it and pushing it
I hear you, and I
Okay.
agree with you. We need to move as fast as possible. There's, where I was alluding to the weeds is there's 2 different avenues for adoption of this future drought. I don't know, what are we calling it? Drought response? And there's 2 different noticing requirements. So I need to hear from you as a board kind of where you're providing direction. And then we internally will then meet and say, okay, which legal path makes the most sense? And then it may be this notice, which is 2 weeks, newspaper notice, and then a public hearing, or it may be some other notice requirement. But we will take your direction, and we understand that this is an urgent matter, and we'll move as quickly as the law will allow.
Well, there's 2 separate actions, right? There's the drought contingency, and then there's this hardship issue. Right.
So the public hearing requirement is for the change to the drought contingency plan. How about the drought declaration? If we did that?
Those, in my mind, are one and the same.
Oh, they are.
But the committee discussion is separate.
And the hardship program could be done, not.
Correct.
Right.
Right, okay.
So the hardship recommendations could essentially be done by a special meeting, whereas the drought declaration and revision of the contingency plan needs to be done by public hearing.
Okay, I get you.
Okay.
Thank you for that
Director
clarification.
Hall has a question.
Thank you. So when I worked at UC Davis, there was a professor, Jeff Mount, who was doing major climate forecasting, and this was in the early 2000s. And his modeling showed that we will enter the worst drought in California's history in the 2020 decade. So I thought about that back, 15, 20 years ago, and thought, 20 years. Huh? But what I would like to see is not just looking at the immediate needs, but if we can anticipate that we are entering the worst drought in California history, it seems to me that it's not just about this year. It's about 3-5 years out into the future. And so then I go back to, instead of taking I don't mean to be disrespectful to your issue that you've raised, but a piecemeal approach. Rather say, okay, if we need to cut back 30% of our, raw water, which we know is the majority of our use, maybe it pays to reorifice all those plates now, instead of saying, let's wait till next spring, see if it's a miracle that occurs. But really look at what investments could we make now that would help prepare us for the future. And so that's what makes me nervous about saying, let's rush it through to protect X customer base, when in fact we have to apply a change across a whole system. So I would just ask that we keep that very much in mind.
Mutually exclusive, actually. I think we have to act immediately for what we've got in front of us, and as Jennifer was saying, come up with a longer strategy, because I agree. We're going to be here next year and the year after and so on.
Yeah.
So I think that, I agree.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that thought, and I agree with it, and I would say that is actually why we're here today. So as you recall, on one of the earlier slides, I've lost control.
Oh, no.
That's unusual. So, for instance, we are always doing the projections forward. and at a staff level, and we are always looking at that target carryover of 78,000 acre feet, and that is our look towards the next year. We're an irrigation district. We could theoretically dry up every reservoir every year if that's what we wanted to do. Camp Far West dries up every single year. They use all their water, except in the wet years. We could do the same. We don't. We're very conservative. We are always planning for the next year. Now, given that we are above that 78,000 acre feet target, we feel comfortable we'll have enough for minimum supply next year. However, if we don't get a good winter, I'll tell you straight off the bat, we will be reorificing everybody next season based on the amount we have available.
Yeah.
And we'll know earlier. I'll tell you, we struggle with the fact that we didn't get the projections right, and I'm saying we as a collective. The entire state was wrong. We used the state's data for runoff. It didn't come. Our own data didn't support what happened. It just was an anomaly.
Can you speak more to that? You're talking about snow melt.
Yeah, so we had, early in the year, February time, we had roughly 80% snowpack. We used that snowpack number to forecast how much runoff we'd get into our reservoirs and used it for our planning purposes. This is what we have done for 100 years. Yep. We have data going back 100 years. We use that data. We use the law of averages and calculate it. Unfortunately, this year was just an anomaly in the fact that it was a cold winter. We didn't have early rains. It basically started as snow and finished as snow. And what happened is it got very hot and windy. The snow started to melt. And because the underlayer never got rain on it, it was already dry. So as the snow melted, it absorbed into the ground and never came as runoff. And then what was available, due to the extreme heat and wind, it evaporated. So we didn't get even close to the amount of runoff that was in the projections. I'm hopeful that was a one-off event, and next winter we'll be able to use our forecasting tools and prepare appropriately. If we don't get an average precipitation for next winter, we'll be having this discussion again early January, February, and we'll be talking about how we're going to reorifice the entire irrigation water customer base, because we need to do something then.
If I may, I don't want to be alarmist, but the soil moisture content, the antecedent conditions were so dry, and the lack of runoff, it's so unexpected from the snowpack. I'm going to get these wrong, but a normal runoff efficiency in a dry year like this is in the 70–60% range. And we saw like a 22% runoff efficiency. It's just really unprecedented. And the next slide kind of bears that out. To me, in my thinking, I'm already thinking towards next year. And even if you get an average year, because the antecedent soil conditions are so dry, you may not see a resulting inflow into your facilities. So everything you're doing now is with next year in mind. And it's really, really dire. If it's even below average or dry again, it's extreme critical. I can't emphasize that enough. So, really, you're preparing now for, it's kind of like a slow-moving emergency that we're in. It really is, we're going to feel it next year if we don't get bailed out with just really significant precipitation.
And back to the
comment. It isn't, we got it wrong, it was an anomaly. Okay. I
The
feel,
whole state got it wrong.
well, I think, based on following this for a long time
Yeah.
here and my own personal experience, this is really an anomaly. I mean, we're talking really different. So, I think you're doing a great job continue. I think Director Giants has a question.
So if I may, can I back up for one moment? And I didn't finish answering the question on potentially finishing out those 2 weeks with those farmers who are maybe vegetables or whatever, who have a need for that. All of that stuff is doable. The issue is you're cutting into these numbers
Right.
that you're saving to prepare for next year.
Right.
And that is why we're having this discussion.
Right.
If this board wants to drain our reservoirs and send it to all of our customers this year, we can do that. However, there's a give and a take for everything we do. So that's why we're here talking about this, that's why we're giving you the data, so to help you make those decisions. I just wanted to add that. Can we do all that? Yes, but there is a
An implication, yeah.
One of
And
the
we
things-
need to, I think we need to understand the nuts and bolts here. I mean, or how many canals are we talking about, and what's the implication of the water supply? I mean, it's hypothetical to me, and those details matter, in my opinion. And I think there's going to be hardship as a result of this situation. And so I think we have to look at the big picture. And, I mean, we're asking treated water customers to cut back, and, you know, I think there's more stakeholders in play here than just ag. And I appreciate ag, I'm an ag person, but it's not just this stakeholder group that this discussion should be taking into account. And I look at your chart, and it's the big picture that counts, as well as the individuals.
So just from a staff's perspective, I think part of the reason we picked October 1st the way we did is our historical records say that in any given year, the peak of summer, we're going through about 5,000 acre-feet of storage every week. Okay? Come October, that cuts back to about 3,000, which indicates to us that a lot of folks have already stopped irrigating or cut way back, or just due to the fact that the days are shorter, they're not getting as much done. So we know reductions have already begun at that time of year. We thought that was a reasonable give. It's not a mandatory cutoff of the season in September when people are still irrigating heavily. We were hopeful that this was a good compromise to get the conservation we need to protect for next year, but also keep as many of those growers as whole as long as we could.
Could you, at some point, Chip, I'm not sure if you have it, but in the past you've talked about the last major drought, and we had reduction in our irrigation water usage, but we did not reorifice. And so I'm wondering, how did we get that kind of reduction, and what was the impact of overall water demand during that time? Because it may be that we can implement the practices that you did last time and get a similar result.
So, great question. The last drought, we did not get a lot of cutback. We got cutbacks, voluntary cutbacks. They were minimal. There was nothing mandatory.
Okay.
I would say the biggest savings we got from our irrigation water was a focus on reoperation of our system and the way we ran the system. Our distribution operators were a lot more conscientious. We cut back. And that's where we got most of our savings. We did have some irrigation customers who were awesome. They cut back. We realized some savings there. However, the number wasn't huge. The biggest majority of reduction was in our operation. And it led to other things, as Director Beerwagen has mentioned. Some of the local creeks were dry. Well, that's because there's not as much tailwater from the ends of our canals anymore, and it's really not what that water was for anyway.
Yeah.
And Director Hall, remember the last drought, there was state emergency regulations myopically focused on treated water.
Yeah.
Even though our own planning documents didn't say that it required a reduction, and even though in our unique system, the disproportionate use is ag. I mean, we could have cut one day of ag deliveries and saved all the treated water necessary to comply with the regulations. And we just couldn't get through to the state our unique circumstances. So it was just a different legal atmosphere we were trying to comply with.
Director Johansson, did you have a question? Comment?
So Chip, I think and correct me if I'm wrong, Ricky, there are certain canals that are left with water in them after October 1st. And if that marries up to these specialty truck farms, then that's a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm.
We can accomplish that. That's something that's doable.
Right.
If it doesn't marry up, then we cannot do the impossible.
So your proposal is dry canals remain dry.
Yes.
But wet canals that already have a winter flow in them, we can allot a little bit to those folks.
To those farmers that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, and I think we would try to negotiate is not a, but ask if they can go lower than 20%, 30, whatever they can go, to make up for that. Okay, so let's get, so I go to the California Water Code, and the priority list, human consumption, you know, livestock, animals, perennial crops, annual crops. And what Karen has said about the drought, starting now, actually there's a theory that we're in a 21-year drought that's interspersed with wet years, and now the hard part is just yet to come. We need to look at much more deeper cuts, but still be responsive to the California Water Code. And just to get back, that's what I thought the Drought Hardship Committee was helping with. It wasn't to, I don't know any other water district that allows somebody to pay less for water. If I came to another water district we're in and said, I can't pay that water, I can't pay that price for your water, they won't give me water.
Right.
So I didn't think there's any variances on how much you pay. Everybody pays the same. It's just how much water do you actually need for your operation, and can you justify that? So going there from October 1st to the 15th, they were saving about 3,000 acre feet of water per week. That's only going to be 6,000 acre feet.
Yes, it's not a ton of water.
It's not a ton of water, and yet that's less than 5%. So we're not going to get
It's
much.
10% in days.
Huh?
It's 10% in days is what it amounts to. The irrigation season is 183 days cut off. You know,
Okay.
It's roughly 10%.
I'm just trying to see where we can get more savings.
Yes.
And I'm not so sure I'm not in favor of 30%. Because,
That was my question, because Chip made the comment, excuse me for interrupting, but that, on the hit on that point, that he said, if we do a 20, we're not gonna get 20. And in my mind,
Right.
well, then do 30. Do 30. Do
Right.
30, right?
and so I also am going to bring up the fact that I got a lot of eyes and ears and getting phone calls, and Chip,
We
you
all
get
are.
a few of them. What happened at 5 o'clock on Friday night, or what happened at 5 o'clock this past Monday on this certain canal when it went, phew, and we know it's not us. And then, so I'm going around talking to water tender guys. And so, came across one, where's your meter? Oh, it's in the truck. Okay, so we had a little talk about use your meter. Where's your meter? Well, I don't have one, but I have this slip here, and he was filling it out. Okay. Went to another guy, he had a meter, was using it. And then went to another one, and he had a meter. Oh, where do you deliver the water? Well, it's going to Butte County.
What?
And I said, well, why do you come up here? He said, because you have pressure in your fire hydrants.
Oh, this was somebody taking our water.
Yeah.
You're talking about the stealing water people. Oh, yeah, okay.
So he had a Senso Blue meter, said it was ours, and he was paying us, but taking it out of district.
Okay.
And I've been told that there are trailers of 2 tanks, 4 tanks going around everywhere filling up.
Yeah.
And so probably not a lot of water in the big scheme of things, but it's the image in the community is, you know.
Water theft will be prominent in the resolution that will eventually be presented to you.
And so I see that first violation is a citation. If that's a customer of ours, I have no problem. Give them a warning. Maybe they intentionally screwed up. But if it's a non-customer, I don't think $1,000 is too much for the first violation. So I'm just throwing out some word here because I think it's getting rampant. And everybody's talking about it,
Yes, they are.
especially down in the western Nevada County.
For that. So just for your information, we do log in all of those folks who have signed up for a hydrant meter, and they are supposed to be providing us the location at which they're delivering, and we do not allow that water to go outside the district. So obviously,
Well,
the person wasn't very truthful in his application.
I'll give you the name of the
Thank you, appreciate it.
Tanker.
Chris?
All right. Director Peters.
I completely agree with Director Hall about this is serious, this isn't a drought. A drought is no longer something we gotta just hunker down and get over. It's something we've gotta plan for in the long run. And I really appreciate the conversation of going more for the long game, trying to really address the systemic problem rather than trying to just chase individual things. And so, one thing we could do is, because I've had the water theft, people thinking it's phantom water users. And so, in my mind, the district, and we keep going to, well, here we have to, the customers are the ones we're gonna either have to cut them off or charge them more or both. And so I think that we really should start thinking about in our budgeting process and how we do things, and I know I'm squeaking the wheel here, but we need to look at canal modernization, seeing how we can improve our own internal system. Just, I think that Placer County Water Agency said they save 15% of their water just by putting gates on a telemetry where they could remotely operate. So they could see the water as it was moving to the system and make adjustments as it went down. We don't have any of that. We were at the meeting the other day and they said there's these splits and it's supposed to go 36 inches of water this way and 36 inches of water this way, and all of it's going this way. And so, these people go in there howling. And so if we just looked at the systemic, the holistic system, and say, these are the pinch points, these are where we're most vulnerable, these are where we're losing most tailwater, and start budgeting and putting that money towards actually fixing our system and doing what we can do, rather than just going to the customers all the time and say, we need more from you. But I'm really, that's what I propose to do. And so that's my 2 cents. I think I'd like to see that, and that it's a budgeting issue. Everyone says, oh, there's never any money for it. But now is the time to make the money for it. Even if we have to cut some other projects or do some other things we have budget for. I don't know what the magnitude of the cost is, but, I think that looking forward, it's going to be money well spent.
I
Director Johansson.
Yeah, I agree. And there is money for efficiency and conservation for water districts. And so I think you guys are already on it and making up projects. So just make sure we have those type of projects included, which I'm sure they are already. And then let's try to get some government money.
And our internal, well.
Yeah, we'll just make it happen.
Right, we need to make it happen. We can't wait and say, well, we won't do it outside. I think we need to make it a more priority to do this work.
Okay. Director Beck.
Thank you. So my final comment is about the messaging out to our communities and how important that is. And, I was brainstorming, I thought, well, I certainly as a director would be willing to go to farmers markets. I'm thinking if we have some NID little pop-up tents and we go to grocery stores. I mean, I don't know where all we go, but to really have some good handout, good materials. Yes, this is where we are. Yes, this is dire. Yes, this is real. This is what we're going to be doing, and come along with us and join us in this community-wide effort. And the messaging is important, and we don't even have on our website that we're in a phase 1 drought, right? So we really need to get these messages out. And again, I'd be willing to do whatever, community meeting, whatever is necessary to get the message out.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of why we're here today, is to get the guidance on where you want us to head with a drought. So I've heard 2 different variations today. I've heard we need to cut back 30%. I've also heard we need to continue supply for certain ag folks.
Right?
On wet canals.
So, yeah.
So,
I want to see the big picture. I'm not comfortable saying for a group of, 5 customers, and I don't know how many we're talking about, we're going to, have water flowing, and for 95% of the customers, we're going to have these I want to see, I'm not willing to support what I consider, I don't want to say the words because it's pejorative, but I mean, I don't feel like, we got to take a step back and make rational, thoughtful, logical decisions with the whole group in mind, not a small customer base, a minority customer base. I'm not saying that we wouldn't ultimately support them, but I'm not going to say run canals, because I don't know what we're talking about here.
Well, I think that's up to the committees that staff is gonna work with, for them to present some ideas to us. Look at the whole picture and say, okay, I mean, I trust that staff and the folks that are doing it will have some, I agree with you though.
But I'm hearing kind of rush, and I'm like, wait. The house is, I mean, yeah, the flames are heading this way maybe, but we have to give staff time to think it through with the big picture in mind. Think about investment and systems. Think about how the legal aspects. It feels like we're like, and I think just let's calm down. I know it's people whose livelihoods are on the line.
And their investments, a lot of these folks have invested years and years and years in their infrastructure and their irrigation and their entire lives and livelihood. And so for them, it is urgent. And I just sort of see that, I see two paths forward. What you're suggesting, I totally support. We need a long-term strategy, and we need something short-term to help to figure it out for these folks that we're talking about.
Well, it's better to define it holistically, I think.
Well,
I mean, knowing how many of these people are and where are they located.
Right.
Well, yeah, but staff will figure that out.
But will they? We don't have the data to represent every small operation. We don't have that data.
I think, you know who's farming what kind of crops and how many miners inches they're taking and what canals they're coming off of. I mean, I know we have that data. I've seen it myself.
Yes, but what we don't have is a framework of who you're gonna support and who we're not, right?
No, understood.
The drought hardship committee focused on commercial ag. I kind of imagine that's what the new framework would also support. We don't know of our customer base who's classified as commercial and who's not. So that's one of the things we need to work on in the framework that with the ag group to determine how we parse out those customers.
Right. I think from what the input I'm hearing and looking at the numbers we do know, we do have an immediate issue in that if we don't take any action, then we really are going to be cutting into our carryover storage for next year, which will make things really dire for next year. If you pair that with some of the input we've received already to date from the commercial agricultural community, that they have already made some decisions regarding planting and some monetary investments that, if aren't dealt with thoughtfully, will cause great financial hardship and then ultimately end up impacting the local economy. My recommendation would be that in light of our immediate need to address our carryover storage, that we take some interim measures through kind of this interim modification, the hybrid approach, with input from the agricultural community, but then we spend a very long, thoughtful process on exactly the other side of the coin. We have to start looking at the potential of long-term drought and what is going to be done, how are we going to address it, because we want to be here for another 100 years, right? Not another 10 years. And I don't know that that is going to be something that we are able to resolve in 6 months in time to be able to ensure we have carryover storage for next year. But I think that it is something that needs to be of highest priority for the board and the staff. I do, though, understand from my conversations with Chip and understanding where we're at with our carryover storage that we do need to make some immediate actions to make some reductions just to ensure our carryover storage from next year. Right. So I would recommend we do somewhat of a hybrid approach, but do not lose sight of the end game, is that we need to be able to be a little bit more able to address water deliveries on a more instantaneous basis when we find ourselves in these positions later in the future and in future years related to drought. Because I agree, it's not going anywhere at this point. I think that it's probably just going to get worse, and it would be prudent to take a long look at customers, how much water is going down which canals, where should we spend money on modernizing the canals? You know, there is a bang for your buck scenario that needs to be walked through. So my recommendation at this point would be that we kind of accept a hybrid approach, but ensure that we don't lose sight of the long game and start really scheduling that out with some strategic planning, as well as what I would like to dovetail into budget planning, capital improvement planning, and start really working that issue.
Okay, I agree. This time, okay, I'd like to do public comment. Go ahead. After Rich, we're gonna do public comment.
So, I believe, I agree there's a two-track mission here. We have, so another irrigation district I'm in, these decisions were made in 2014 and 15 because it was a much more severe drought. NID has done such a good job of supplying water, we've not had to go through this kind of exercise. So this year, we knew in February, March, what we could do, what we couldn't do. Plans were made, water was purchased, and hopefully it's secure. But, so I think the long-term planning is necessary. We're not gonna do it in a month. We're gonna take our time. We need to make immediate decisions right now about, water storage for going into next year. Placer County has a lot of great orchardists, a lot of mandarin orchards. They've invested decades, generations in building those. If that water's cut off on October 1st, if my water or my mandarin groves were cut off October 1st and not in Placer County, I may not have a crop.
Exactly right.
After expending untold amount of money. The fruit just will not develop. So this is a critical point for all those orchardists. If you're stone fruit, you might get away with it, but a mandarin grower down there, and there used to be only 10 growers down there, now they're over 60. It is a significant source of food, and I look at it, food security, not so much the economy, but the economy is a huge part of it. I gave the number of 30 years to get back. If I lost an orchard right now, it'd take, you get crops in your 6, 7, 8 year, but it's not very good fruit. It's not the quality fruit that you have at 20 years. And 30 years is when my sophisticated buyers, they want the old trees, the trees, because it has a different flavor. And that's the market these, Placer County mandarin orchards growers have created. So to cut their water off October 1st is not going to work.
No.
That's disaster. And so, yes, we do something now, see what we can do on a hybrid approach and plan for the future. But let's take into account that, these guys have their heart and soul in those orchards.
And I have heard from citrus down there.
Yeah, and
An option.
yeah, and the guys here, the truck farms, the specialty crop guys, they have their heart and soul in what they're doing. And we're fortunate to have them for food security for this community.
Okay. This time we'll take public comment on this issue, the water storage contingency plan. If you'd like to comment this morning on all this discussion that's going on, star 9 your phone at this time. Anybody like to comment on drop contingency plan?
Jeremy Meanu?
Oh, there we go. All right, so, Jeremy, no. But no, would you go ahead, please?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I wasn't sure exactly how to do it. I'm not on a phone. I'm on, we figured it out. First, I want to say thank you to all the board members and everybody who's put work into this. I know it's a heavy issue, and I appreciate the time and effort you put into it. I'm the owner and operator of Super Tuber Farm. We're in Chicago Park. We grow 12 acres of certified organic carrots, beets, cabbage, and potatoes, selling to the wholesale market from Tahoe all the way down to Davis. I also, I guess I'll just be brief and blunt because y'all said a lot of great things and I appreciate it. Early water shutoffs could be pretty devastating, and part of the reason I'm here is I feel like I'm still learning about what's going on and the decision-making process that's going on. Depending on the date that early water or that the irrigation season would be cut short, we would lose 80 to 90% of our crops for the season. And talking to other producers, I feel like we might even be in a lucky situation. Some mandarin growers, I heard what you were saying, Rich. I think there are some mandarin growers who feel like their orchard would just be gone. It's not like they wouldn't have a crop for a year, they wouldn't have trees. So, I mean, at least could we cobble together enough money, we'd be able to farm again next year. But yeah, and again, that also depends on when that early shutoff date is. I heard anything from 2 weeks to 2 months as potential early shutoff water dates. And in terms of the uncertainty of when that will happen, that is very concerning. I've already got money in the ground for crops that would need that water. So I guess there's two things that I'm going to say is just uncertainty and transparency about how decisions are made and what is coming down the pipeline. So uncertainty about when that date would be of early water shutoff is really critical. October 1st is somewhat more manageable than September 1st. I guess that date changing or moving around is just not doable for producers to kind of work with that level of uncertainty. The other one is kind of the transparency about priorities in terms of, Chip, I appreciate what you said about, folks who rely on that late fall water should have winter water, but I guess in my assumption is that water would be delivered throughout the season before. I mean, the priorities of how you would decide whether or not you could buy winter water, whether you could buy fall water, whether the season would be cut short. That kind of like a hierarchy of which water customers and which seasons would be prioritized is not something that maybe it's something laid out in NID's rules and regulations, but it's not something I've heard before. So I've always kind of assumed, well, I could buy fall water or winter water if I needed it, but that just may not be the case. And then I also just don't want to kind of fall into the idea of we're either we're delivering water to these specialty crop growers, or we're who are on wet canals, or we're conserving. I think there's a lot of us who may be willing to take some water cutbacks, and it's not like we're asking for water that doesn't exist. I don't want to bite ourselves in the butt for next season or for 3 seasons down the road. I'm willing to work with the district to come to whatever compromise we can do to reduce some water usage now, so that we can have some water through the season and still have water next year. So I guess those are the main things. I think just encouraging the district to be certain about what decisions they're making and transparent about how those decisions are making and what producers can do to buy more water or not, and how water can be used, whether, I guess that's kind of everything I had. Again, I appreciate your time, all of you, from operations to the board. And I'd be happy to work with operations of the board or whoever to kind of come up with some plans that work for everybody.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Jeremy. I will just say for everyone that Jeremy is my appointee for the Drought Hardship Committee. So knowledgeable, longtime farmer with a big investment in his crops.
Good
for his
choice.
family. And thank you very much. I think he was a great choice. All right.
Okay, Molly Nakahara, you're on next. Go ahead, Molly.
Okay, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Molly Nakahara. I am the Farm Institute Director at Sierra Harvest, and thank you so much for opening up to public comment and for all of the work you do in service to our community and to agriculture. Just a little caveat, I am also a farmer and I chose this region to farm in because of the water. So I know that NID has a long commitment to supporting agriculture and making the Nevada County a place where farming can thrive. I wanted to just add a little bit of data behind what Rich was talking about in terms of food security in the region and how the service that a lot of our specialty crop growers provide the community at large. Last season, 2020, Sierra Harvest's gleaning program delivered 25,000 pounds of produce that was harvested in farm fields throughout the region. And we delivered that to the 8,000 food insecure clients of the Interfaith Food Ministry. That gleaning program is now expanding to also bring food into the Food Bank of Nevada County. So farms like Jeremy's are helping feed the most vulnerable people in our community. We also have a Harvest of the Month program, which provides nutrition education and fresh produce to 96% of all the K through 8 students in Western Nevada County. We're in our 11th year of this program, and we have brought 86,000 pounds of local fruits and vegetables to school children and their families. And so losses experienced by local specialty crop producers would be felt by school children. You know, carrots that are served in the lunches and brought into the classroom in January and February are planted on farms in August, and a 2-week dry period could lose that crop. So, you know, there's a bigger impact that these farms are providing to the community at large that we are super grateful for. So I just want to urge, you know, I appreciate how much time you are spending to look closely at this issue. I do think I support what Director Heck is proposing, and that I think there is a solution that we can find that is fair and also protects this critical agriculture. And I'm so glad to see that a big public awareness campaign is part of this move forward, and that is a place where Sierra Harvest would love to help. I do think there's a lot of work we could do to encourage, you know, protect ag, reduce your irrigation, protect ag in our community. I think that would be very compelling. So we're here to work with you, and we appreciate all the work you're doing in support of ag. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Molly. Tim Van Wagner, you're next. Go ahead.
Hey, can you hear me? Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Hey, so yeah, hi everybody. My name is Tim Van Wagner. My farm is First Rain Farm. I get water from the Snow Mountain Ditch in the Lake Garapurdan neighborhood. I want to just thank everybody for the thoughtful discussion around this, you know, unprecedented decision-making process. And yeah, I agree with mostly what everybody's saying. And Karen, I think your point about the long game and is really well taken, and thinking about this as kind of like sticking around. And yeah, basically I've been involved in agriculture for the last 13 years in the county, and we employ 6 people full time. We grow a mixture of vegetables, berries, seed crops on about, we irrigate about 10 acres with the water we get from NID. And, you know, as basically a specialty crop grower, you know, we have a lot of capital outlay in the spring and a lot of sales beginning now. And a lot of our crops, we have a turning point in basically July. That's when we do our replanting for the fall. And so decision making obviously is kind of dependent on, you know, information that's out there as far as one way or the other, you know, what decisions are being made from NID is going to help us make the decisions that are going to, you know, ensure our sales and success of crops into the fall. And just as a side note, I mean, you know, so for the farm owner, most of our actual income that we make doesn't come until August onward. Everything up until then, that's paying for our labor, for all the expenses. So, you know, losing water kind of at that critical turning point means curtailing potential to recoup those costs and make the profit for that year. And yeah, it's just so dry this year, and it's incredible how quickly these effects are showing up in just in the surrounding landscape. And I think that what Jeremy was saying about potential cuts, I think that from my own perspective, having some water for the whole season is way better than having even if it's 50%, is way better than having no water starting August or September, just given that, last year we were, it was dry until Thanksgiving pretty much. So, having at least that water through the regular irrigation season is critical for kind of maintaining a minimum amount of crops. And every farm, I think, can make these appropriate decisions about which crops, if you have limited water supply, what are you going to grow? There's certain things that you'll grow and others that you'll drop based on that availability of water. And at least that can help get you through that season. And, obviously we only know 1 year at a time what's ahead, but we can all guess that it's getting drier and drier. So, I would definitely be available for more comment and discussion on options. And I also think that the comment about data is really crucial. I know that there's maybe privacy things about that, but if NID is trying to kind of craft some sort of priority water delivery plan for the future, maybe as part of the annual, water form, collecting some sort of Schedule F information, which would kind of indicate the level of, dependency on the water for their income. Because I think there is a lot of water that is not tied to people's income. So thank you so much. Appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you,
Tim.
The name of his farm, so I can get it.
First Rain.
First Rain.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. Anybody else like to comment on the NID water storage contingency discussion? Star 9 your phone at this time. Not seeing any. Anybody else? Last chance to comment. Okay. Oh, wait, there's one. Alita Barrett, go ahead.
Hi, yes, this is Alita Barrett. I'm also a local farmer, and I appreciate the conversation. I feel like everyone brought up a lot of good points already, and I appreciate the support that the agricultural community is getting and the consideration on this board. I did have a couple of non-ag comments or questions, such as I saw in the description that people could water their lawns every other day or up to 3 times a week. And I've always thought that's a little ridiculous when we're coming into a drought or, looking forward over the next 50 to 100 years. I think we all know that water is going to be a huge issue, and having lawns is probably not going to be something in our futures, but something of our past. And I feel like that's an easy way to cut. People could water their lawns once a week and still maintain the grass won't die completely. And maybe if miracles happen and we have more water in the future, they can have a nice green lawn again. Maybe there can be financial incentives for people to get rid of their lawns and replace them with things that don't require as much water. That would be great. So that's maybe a savings there. And then I also am in very strong support of implementing more strong policies now so that we have more water in the future. Maybe more like the 30% reduction in water. I really do think we need to make sure we have water for next year and future years. So like a lot of the other farmers were suggesting, having a reduction now, saving that water now, is to be sure that we can have it later on. I think many of us are nervous about, having the water shut off earlier than August or October 1st. If NID keeps looking at the numbers and decides, oh, that's not early enough, all of a sudden maybe the water could get shut off even earlier. And that is something that makes us feel very insecure with our crop planning. So that's also a concern. I think that's it. I'll pass it back to you guys. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for calling, Alita. Next, Shauna. And Shauna, I'm going to butcher your last name. If you could pronounce that for us, please.
It's Maziarz.
Maziarz. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, my name is Shauna Maziars. I own Three Forks Bakery and Brewing Company in downtown Nevada City. And for those of you who aren't familiar with my restaurant, we are truly a farm to table restaurant. So we purchase almost all of our produce from local farms. And so I just wanted to speak up to say that, you know, this obviously has an impact beyond the ag community. I'm not the only business that it's obviously supporting local farmers, many consumers, direct consumers are supporting them, but as a business, we're completely reliant on local agriculture. It's our entire business model. And, I wanted to, I guess, say two things. One is thank you all so much for this incredibly considerate conversation you're having. I'm feeling really buoyed by the amount of care you're putting into thinking about, not only what this means for us now, but what this means for us in the future. And I hope that part of the conversation you're having behind the scenes is a larger conversation about NID's infrastructure. I'm actually also an NID customer, and the amount of waste I see, even just in my little system here, the two houses that are on my little system, we have so much waste. And I know that there's, obviously decades of conversation at NID about infrastructure improvements. So, I hope that we're having this conversation about sort of how do we educate all of us as consumers, and how can we as consumers make reductions, but how can NID as an agency make reductions in your system? I think it's a little bit frustrating that we're at this position where farmers who are feeding us are being asked to potentially not actually have enough water to support their livelihoods, when there's so much waste that we could be reducing within the system. So, I'm sure that you're having that conversation about sort of internal, and obviously that's not going to happen this year. That's a very long-term, financial commitment that NID needs to make. But I did want to just put that into this conversation because I haven't really heard that said yet. And then I just want to say that, my understanding, we sit down each year and do crop planning with most of the farmers we work with. And having no water after October 1st would be devastating for many of them. So I just wanted to back up what they're saying, these veggie farmers, that it's very dry here in October. They need that water in order to support their livelihoods. And we, in turn, as a restaurant, need them to thrive in order for us to exist and to feed our community. It's really real what we're talking about here, and of course, as you've said, it's not only something we're dealing with in Nevada County. The entire state is going to be looking potentially at food shortages. So, without water, we have no food. Without food, what do we do? So, I think about it from sort of that specific, feeding ourselves perspective. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Shauna. Thanks for calling in. Okay, anybody else like to comment this morning on Start on Your Phone? Any other comments on drought contingency plan and moving forward? Okay, I don't see any. Chris, do you see any?
No.
Okay. So this is a non-action item today. We will not be taking action. This is for direction to staff at this time. Has staff got enough information today?
I still am
You're shaking your head.
in a gray area.
Okay.
Chris, can you put the slides back up, please? All right, so I heard pretty clearly that most of these we were pretty comfortable with. It seems to me the one hangup is the terminate the irrigation season early. Is that a consensus?
Yes.
So that's really where we're stuck right at the moment, as far as I can tell. And this is just staff's recommendation. If the board wants to see something different, that's obviously whatever you guys want to talk out and suggest, we can work with it. Just realize that any deviation from this or anything that we do that doesn't contribute more to conservation will affect the carryover number. That's all I'm trying to convey to you.
So my question is, if we upped it to 30%.
So
would that change?
Let's have that discussion. How do I get 30% reduction from our agriculture, our irrigation water customers? How do I get 30%? So my problem is I can't go out and reorifice every single box at 30% less for a number of reasons. One, our miner's inch delivery, there is no such thing as 30% off of a miner's inch. Otherwise, you gotta customize orifice plate, 5,000 orifice plates, and I'm not gonna get those in a timely fashion. Secondly, the amount of staff it takes to go to 5,000 boxes over 500 miles of canal is not gonna be timely. It's gonna take me a month or more to get that done. So we're not gonna realize the 30% anymore, because it's gonna take us forever to get there, along with the cost to do all that. We've done the study, it's about $500,000-ish to pay for the boards, the orifice plates, manpower, locks, all of that. I hear you, and I think that's an excellent tool. I think it's an excellent tool at the beginning of an irrigation season, and probably something we'll have to use next year if we don't get substantial.
But from what I hear about the 30%, the only, I mean, are you speaking about treated water customers? Because there's two, right? There's the treated water, and then we've got the irrigation water. I've heard Chip say that by reducing and cutting water off at the October 1st date, that's really about a 10% savings. So going from 20 to the 30, and the only percentage I see up here is a 20% on the treated side. Is that what you're referring to, Director Beerwellingen, or?
Referring in general, not to.
Okay, all right. I just want to be clear.
We received an email this week, and I don't see that he's on the list, but our UC Farm advisor, Dan Macon, he made a suggestion that we reach out just to the commercial agricultural customers, the ones that livelihoods depend on it, to say, would you rather take less water during the season or get cut off at the end? Or it sounds like the pasture people cutting off at the end is not a problem, where the others, it's not, it is. And I understand that the canal, you have to shut the whole canal off, and so it all gets, but they could put plates in, or, you know, we could just use it with orifice plates, and that's a much smaller population than the 5,000. I don't know how many there are, but it's a fraction.
Micro look.
Yes, so we focus on that community and really try to say, because they're the biggest water users, start with the biggest water users that use most water and work with them to see how they, you know, how they do that. And then try and get everybody else, launch a massive public relations campaign to reach out to all the 1-inch customers and all of the smaller customers to conserve, but try and be more precision about how we cut back and help these agricultural people, rather than just saying you've got to cut, either stop being, you know, it's not one or the other. Give them more of an option of which way they prefer to go.
So my question, is that
that was.
May I ask Laura a question? So your statement is that majority of water users are non-ag,
Yes.
and to work with that group to try to get them focused on reductions.
Right, through a public relations campaign, non-ag through a public relations campaign, and the ag group, you know, try to accommodate what best suits it, and rather than turning off canals, using orifice plates to, and I don't know the numbers, I don't have data, so I don't know what that is, but that's one solution that I
Chip, how, on your projections for carryover storage, that slide, did it include any additional diversions or additional runoff coming in, or were you conservative and said no more?
There will be no more runoff.
Well, with the curtailment, but does that include any additional, or that's conservative, no more water?
This does run into the winter months, and it's a conservative number for any storms we get through October. So in other words.
So there's 1 or 2 storms in there?
Yes.
So
40% of average is what we're shooting for.
But if the curtailment hits us back to pre-1914, we will not be able to count on any additional diversions. We'd modify that.
Yeah, we've had Octobers with 5+ inches of rain.
Right.
Yeah.
And if we have an October like that, they will not have lifted the curtailments yet. So we will be actively communicating with the water board about how to manage that inflow into our.
Right, so those projections could essentially be worse.
Correct.
Okay. Right, my recommendation would be that staff does just a little bit more homework with working with the ag community as well as possibly looking through the projections. And then we could also propose to schedule a special meeting to flesh this out a little bit more before we get to public hearing. Would that work? I'm looking at Chip at the feasibility.
I'm really struggling.
Right.
Because I'm getting both messages at the same time.
Okay.
Getting, we need to cut 30%, but I need to keep people in water. And I can't convey to you that,
Yeah.
but picking just a few customers along a canal is not going to save us water.
Right.
It will save us a very, very small amount because I have to water up the entire system. To see two customers potentially at the end, I'm not going to get savings.
Yeah.
I have a question.
I don't think we're asking for that. But if it's a wet canal, we need to know that.
And that one's a little easier.
Okay.
Demand on a wet canal.
And it's already wet, so the water's already there. Feeding a customer along the way is not nearly as difficult on those canals.
So
I'm there.
Yeah, so I got a couple of things. I just want to point out, did you want to go? I didn't.
Okay.
He raised his hand before you did.
Oh, he did, well then, okay.
All right.
I defer to Director Jones, our major farmer.
Yeah. So I want to point out that we're having this discussion and the FERC impacts requirements haven't even kicked in yet. So this is something that we're going to have anyway, because when the FERC impact the requirements kick in, we'll be dealing with something like this almost every year, potentially. Okay, so second of all, public awareness, social media, we could boost that up. Schedule F, I think not everybody files a Schedule F that's legitimate, corporations, family corps. So for an individual Schedule F work, the $3,000 annual, so USDA defines a farm making $1,000 a year. The old Williamson Act requirements was you made $3,000 a year, you had a $15,000 investment. We actually recommended at the Ag Advisory Commission to change that, and
That's my recommendation.
and it got into, it's just antiquated. Those are old numbers. Income should be, 30, 40,000 a year maybe, and investment equal or higher. So, so that kind of defines it a little bit better for me. But we're not asking to load up a canal for one customer or a handful, because it's just not going to work. That's the luck of the draw.
And my suspicion is, just the suspicion that the dry canals are for those, there's not very many vegetable farmers on those dry canals. That's just my gut feeling about that they're higher up in the elevation where there are wet canals.
Yeah,
That's all it.
our operations are on a dry canal,
Yeah.
but we have
Yeah.
farm storage, so we take that and mitigate it.
So kind of what I'm October 1st. October. For those 2 weeks, it's going to be somewhere less than 6,000 acre feet, obviously.
Yeah.
So it won't be a boon of water, but if that's the direction we are looking to head.
That little of water in what you're talking about is putting somebody out of business over 6,000 acre feet. I don't choose to, it doesn't seem like the savings is worth putting somebody out of business for. But here's an elephant in the room kind of question, is, so if we look at all of our raw water customers and separate those who are food producers from those who are not, food and fiber, from those who are not, and this probably goes to a legal question, is it possible that we can implement through orifice changes or whatever, curtailments or cutbacks for those who are not food and fiber producers during this, very hardship time. And you got someone with, I will just say, I have a person in my division who gets 5 minor inches, and he waters the most beautiful green grass you've ever seen. And I had a conversation, said, your price is going to go up. And he said, you know what, I don't care. I really want my grass. And so there's this whole sort of other thing that isn't for this discussion necessarily, but it's like, is that the best use of our water? And so I'm asking, I guess, legal, is there a way that we can separate, make a finding that food producers have a legitimate higher right to the water than non-food producers, and therefore implement these 30% reductions via orifice changes on those people who are not food producers?
The answer is yes.
Oh, that's surprising.
There's an implementation issue, though.
There's a what?
There's an implementation issue.
I understand, but but some of those folks take a lot of water.
But just to be frank, if we're dry again next year, we're having that discussion, for sure.
Well, we should have that discussion.
Well, I think we should be having that as part of this discussion.
That's the framework. What's the number of customers, would you say, in the raw water customer class that are ag versus lawn waterers?
We don't
have.
Everybody who files an application for water has to provide us information on what they're growing or water. So everybody is irrigating, whether it's grass for beautification of their own purpose for their lawn.
Good question.
But we could go back to the application and just,
But it's not gonna,
they could have modified it since the connection.
Well, and they could have also not been on it.
yes.
We could have require a self-certification program.
Just the implication.
Yeah.
We could do I think that was also something I wanted to look into a little bit more. I do think that that's possibly a viable option, and it appears that it's allowable under the water code, correct?
Yes.
Very
Right to the Constitution.
I have
Right.
no idea.
So possibly staff can go back and do a little bit more homework. We do get back into the implementation issue on, what is the number of customers we're talking about? Or the flip side of the coin could be we do a self-certification program for the commercial agricultural users.
So I agree, and I think that's a good long-term solution.
Yeah.
But we're not gonna have that information in the next month.
Right.
So I appreciate that, and I think that framework that we
Mhm.
move forward with on a drought hardship group, hopefully will help spell out who is commercial, who is not. We really don't have that delineation right now, so we really have some work before us for the future that will help next time around.
Yeah.
But right now, we're trying to deal with the immediacy of the issue at hand.
Okay.
Director Johansson.
Okay. So, to be correct, I understand that's a long-term project.
Yeah.
But once we get there, commercial ag could be cut 20% and non-commercial 40%? Is that legal?
So I differentiate based on crop type. That's what
Yeah,
the
there you
water
go.
code talks about.
Yeah. If you
Gets
stick to the
into
water code.
annuals versus perennials, and if somebody's growing a lawn, that goes to the bottom of the list.
It's not even on the list.
200 redwood trees on their 20-acre farm.
But it's not even, lawn isn't even on the list.
Well,
It's
it's,
not on the list.
It's not on the.
so we want to be careful. It's a beneficial use,
Yes, it is.
but it just may not be a beneficial use in a dire water shortage situation. So, we would have to take these on a case-by-case basis. And timber production is a beneficial use.
It is.
But again, it may not be one that's at the top of the list in the shortage.
And
That's
it's not
be timber.
it's not commercial.
Be cut to be timber.
Well, in this
Brush
case.
trees.
Yeah. So, to finish my question then, I thought we'd be looking at the state water code list versus those that are not on the list. Versus, not so much, well, you're annual, you're perennial, you're this, you're that, within that water code list, the 4. So I didn't want to start saying, oh, you're annual, you're perennial, so you get more water perennial. I was thinking more, you're on the list or you're not on the list, and the list is kind of an entirety Is that,
I think we would want to stick to the Irrigation District Act, which speaks about crops. And we would want to inventory our customers' crop types, and then we would prioritize those. And this isn't the first time this was done. We did this in '77. May have done it in the early '90s, I don't know. I haven't looked at that file, but in other words, this is something that this district has gone through in the past. So we're not totally starting from scratch. We can look at those prior extreme years and see what was done, and then build from there.
Yeah, so one of the categories we have is family garden. So I'm assuming that that's not a commercial agricultural grow. Although they will argue they are growing foods for their own family. So
Right, that's
and
exactly.
it's
I want my
food,
tomato discussion, either way.
and it's food security.
Slope.
It is a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
That was my point, because I know a lot of people that have family gardens that grow they grow all their vegetables for their own home and their neighbors. My neighbor is one of them. So they irrigate so they can have a good garden, and they share it with their, they don't sell it or anything, but we share our resources.
Well, that would just be one of the
And
categories.
And like, there's the California law about the human right to water, the 50 gallons per person per day for indoor use. Well, there should be done, they don't. The big elephant in that room is that it takes 5 times that just to provide, order of magnitude, maybe 5 times to provide food. The water it takes to provide the food that you eat it just eclipses the indoor use. And so, there's that big inequity that we don't count for how much water it takes to produce our food, and that's not in that human right to water. But so it's complicated. There's a lot of.
Is that a law now?
The human right to water, yes.
Oh, yeah.
2012, I think.
Could I just say one thing? I just think the points that have been made about community outreach and public relations and a really strong media campaign, social media campaign, it can't be understated. And we have to change people's understanding and attitude so that those people who have the large lawns think about alternatives to that. And where we have discretional use of water, that we voluntarily cut back for the good of the whole. And I think we have to really push that. It's not going to happen naturally.
I appreciate that. I will say, in our experience in the last few years, one of the major concerns with the discussion on lawns is that's my fire prevention.
Yeah.
So we will get that argument as well, but just side note, I'll let you know. So anyway, I'm hearing then direction for staff is we're okay with most of the proposals. The October 1st is one of the hang-up issues. Staff can go back and give you a little bit more analysis on which canals, or maybe how many customers and the demands of the canals that may stay wet due to winter customers, and get you that data on how much savings it will actually be. If it turns out it's really not much, I don't know, maybe we come back to this body and finish that discussion, but we'll start moving forward, and I believe that it would be with a conservation plan similar to what we did in 2014, 2015, an updated resolution with some additional drought actions. But most of them are good. We'll have to finish up on that last one and ending the season early. And as soon as we find out, we need to start communicating to our customer base, because they all need to plan. I'm hearing very clearly they all need to plan on what's happening.
That's right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks,
We have
Chip.
timing, so 2 weeks from now we come back, or?
Right, I was
So
looking.
maybe by then we have more information on the framework for the contingency stuff.
So just looking at the calendar, we are meeting with them next week, and then our next meeting would be the 23rd. I think at a minimum, we should have some additional information flushed out, and hopefully some type of proposal that the board could consider action on, or we can still continue to flesh it out. But I also think, I agree, we need to start putting the long-term strategy really high on the radar.
Yeah.
I'm just going to point out, another 2 weeks is we're gonna go deeper
Yes.
into reductions. And if it's 4 weeks, then we're looking at
Well, one of the
40%.
Right,
One of the things we begin immediately is the social media and the outreach campaign.
agree.
I think there's a lot of, Sierra Harvest was on the call today, there's a lot of partners, there's a lot of organizations that have a network beyond just ag users and irrigation users, but treated water users. We need to reach out to them and be messaging and promoting messages, and they can help promote our message and vice versa. Because I've already seen it in a couple organizations. I know Circle had an announcement just last week on the drought and water use, and had a series of, ways to conserve. So there are other local nonprofit and organizations that are in the community that we can partner with right now to begin that message, so that we can start ticking up from that 106,000 acre feet of storage. And a lot of it is gonna be beyond just what this body does. A lot of it is just the nature of people's everyday use. So,
Cut back. That was an excellent point, the 106,000 feet. Rich, your point's well taken as well. If we delay, that's just deeper into the bucket we're digging. However, what the graph showed us is that if we did nothing, we're at 106,000 acre feet of carryover. That's not great, but it's not the end of the world either. Essentially, we're borrowing on next year's water.
Except that these guys are making crop decisions right now.
No, and that
he
point
said
is,
nothing.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, you're talking about 2 weeks and then 2
right.
weeks for action
as
and.
far as timeliness, yes.
Yeah, is that
It is
doesn't
too late.
feel like it's timely enough
Gotcha.
for
No.
those who are putting.
It's way too late.
It's way too late. Yeah, that was my
Can
sense,
we
is
do
that we've got to
action in
move
the
more
special
quickly.
a public hearing in the special meeting? One of the considerations we can do, due to the timing, and I agree that we are under a clock at this point, is that we can have a special meeting to take the formal action. We are going to miss just simply the noticing period, because we'd have to notice today. And so we could schedule a special meeting even the next day afterwards to take formal action.
There you go.
This notice.
We'll get it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all
Thank you,
so
Chair.
much. This is a great
Thank you all that
conversation.
called in today. The board will have a 5-minute break at this time.
Thank you.
you. We're back in session. Tonight's board meeting, June 9th. Next item, grand jury report, and Chip, looks like you got the hot seat all day.
Yeah, well, thank you. This is in response to the grand jury report that we received on May 4th. And basically, we went over this entire report, basically recommendation and detail by detail at the last board meeting. I think I provided a draft response. I have agendized this one more time, and the reason is that I put our responses in the format that the grand jury has requested, and I put them in the report. They are in bold, and they begin on page 13 of their report. I did not change any of these from the responses I gave you last time, but I wanted to give you one last opportunity to review them. And if you all are in agreement and no changes needed, we can then, would be my recommendation to allow the board secretary to respond on behalf of the board and send this back.
We did no, go ahead. I was just going to add a little bit of context. We did receive one comment regarding the $1.90 add-on for the regulatory fees, and so staff is looking into it. It is substantiated by specific line items in the operations, hydropower, and one other budget, but we're still putting that information together. It is actually a lot of line items. I didn't expect it to be that many. And essentially what it is all of the regulatory sampling fees for the various agencies that are required to be paid by virtue of operating a water system. And so once we are complete with putting that information together, we can load on our website what the breakdown of that fee is and also provide it to the board. I can tell you that the fee is going to need to be looked at during the Prop 218 process for rates. So I think that it's very warranted to let everyone know what the fee is, but we can't necessarily address the fee itself at this point until we go through Prop 218.
Yes, and on that topic, our recommended response is, so the recommendation is just that NIE should include a complete listing of the $1.90 regulatory fees that are included in the amount charged to customers in the cost of service study. The public should be able to see individual fee type, total of all fees, and the number of customers estimated to share responsibility for the fee. Our response is this recommendation will be addressed in the ongoing rate setting process as we move into 2022. In the interim, though, we do have it.
Typically what you find is usually those fees are just loaded into the rates charged for water. In this particular situation, they had pulled the rates out separately. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but that's simply going to be a board desire direction once we move forward into the Prop 218 process, whether or not we want to continue to do that.
Okay. Other board comments, so we're messing with our screens.
I have
Go ahead,
two comments. One is on F10, so kind of consistent with this conversation, the second sentence under where we say agree, that the calculation can be hard to track, and that could be implied it's hard for us to track it, or it's hard for others to track it, and I thought what part of your language that you just used, Jennifer, about is derived from multiple external sources, but at least clarifying that it can be hard for an external viewer to track as opposed to for us to track. Right. He can track it. And then under the recommendation for R2, it says that is about the absorbing the cost of the electronic payments for customers, and the board, the answers or the response is the board has begun implementation of this recommendation, and I didn't think that we were suggesting that we would absorb the cost of the electronic payment for customers.
Correct. And I read that a little differently than maybe you do, and maybe
Okay.
it's an interpretation.
Okay.
My reading of it is that we need to have a public discussion and openly talk about absorbing the cost. Well, we started those discussions. We haven't made any decisions yet, but we at least had a public meeting where we had the discussion.
Yeah.
And it will be an ongoing process.
And this goes back to the Prop 218 process. Many agencies is simply roll the cost of the processing fee into the rates.
Right.
It is also not wrong to charge the specific users for the rates. You could look at it either way.
Right.
Maybe a
So
change.
language change maybe in order to capture your concern. I do hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
You could just add the board.
Begun the public discussion.
Implementation of this public discussion recommendation.
Yes,
There you go.
that's it.
Then that
Yeah.
clarifies
Begun
that.
Yeah,
public
thank you.
discussion.
Yeah, yeah, that's the end of my comment.
And then just so we're clear on F10, the calculation stems from multiple pages and divisions in the water budget and can be, it's difficult in the fact that it's well over 100 line items.
I think it's just trying to get to, it can be hard for an external party to identify the sources of the calculation.
Do we say the general public?
Yes.
Yeah. Or you could just say that the calculations come from multiple,
The calculation from multiple pages and divisions
departments and multiple sources.
and are related to regulatory fees associated with
Exactly.
external agencies.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, but to just say, well, it's hard to track who,
Yes.
I agree.
Sure.
But just note that it is, and in the, what we're doing is the ongoing rate setting.
Okay, other, board questions, suggestions? Mine revolves around the, R5, formal documented process for collecting, resolving, reporting consumer complaints. Is this a, we don't have a written policy for that now, I assume. Is it, how cumbersome is that gonna be to have that? And how much is it gonna change the complaint process?
I don't know that it'll holistically change.
Either.
This is probably actually warranted, given the fact that the committees don't exist anymore. The committees were a good avenue for which we would escalate complaints up to the board level at the committee level.
Yes.
And then we would get feedback and then answer the complaints. But this is good. We will update a policy, given the current board committee status, and it'll give staff something to reference and something that's a little more black and white. We have a very good complaint process. It's just not as formal as written down in the law. So, all I'm gonna do is write down what we do and put it in the policy.
We're very responsive.
Yeah, I agree.
That if that's the complaint, then I would argue against it. Okay. This is a,
Public comment.
oh, yes, thank you. Would anybody in the public like to comment on our grand jury reports, UNID joint and payment fees response? If you'd like to comment on this item, start on your phone. One last chance. If you'd like to comment, start on your phone on grand jury report response. Okay, seeing none?
So I think at this point, we have taken some good edits and some comments. Is the board comfortable then with passing it to the board secretary to finish the process?
Yeah.
Yes, do
So-
you need a vote or
Yeah,
motion?
how about a motion?
Dustin, do we need a?
This is agendized as a review item,
As a review.
so I think this is just direction only and.
I'm going to authorize the board secretary to send.
Okay.
I motion that we authorize the board secretary to finalize and send the grand jury.
Motion.
No.
Don't need it.
I'm saying we don't need one.
You don't.
We don't.
But we can say we
But what-
reviewed it. We find
It was a great motion.
We find them reasonable.
Okay.
All right.
We have a thumbs up from,
Yeah.
all right.
Thumbs up without a motion.
We have a foot up.
All right, thank you, Chip.
Wow,
Thanks, Chip, for all your work.
11:30, who would have thought?
About that.
Great job. Not until 2 weeks from now. Can't leave us.
Okay. Okay, next item is a general manager's report. This is interim general manager. Is he gonna?
Great, Greg's still in the hot seat.
Interim.
Man, who's here for that? I'm here anymore for that.
That template, yes.
Yeah.
Who'd like to go first?
The general manager's
I have had a very short stint here. I just want to report that I've been spending my time really getting up to speed, reading policy documents, understanding concerns and priorities of the directors, and really just understanding the business of each one of the departments, and it's been wonderful. I think we have a lot of good work ahead of us, and I'm very excited. And Greg, did you want to update them on anything more specific that?
No. At this point, I don't have anything very more specific to update.
We should update our appreciation for the job you did.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Well, thank you. I mean, I will just say thank you for putting your trust into me for the last number of months, 11 plus.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate your time and assistance and believing in me to do what we had to do for the last year, and staff as well for bringing us forth, because it's not a one-person job, right? It's everybody. And so I really am thankful that Jennifer is here and in the seat, and we're having a lot of good conversations, and I'm really looking forward to working under Jennifer and moving what we can forward. So very excited.
Thank you, Greg.
Yeah, thank you, Greg.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, Board of Directors reports items. Who would like to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Because I don't have much to say.
All right.
I've been on the 2-week vacation on the Green River, and one of the things that was interesting, though, related to water, is that observation that in that southwest area, they are and the Rockies, they're in the exact same position we are, with very dry soil, where the runoff is not resulting in storage, and so it looks like the whole western United States, as the chart would indicate, are in the same boat, and at their overall water storage and water utilization strategies. So that's what I learned from a business point of view.
Brenda Peters.
Yeah, on June 1st, I want to give a shout out to Chip and Chad. They gave us a tour of the Lake Wildwood Treatment Plant along with Director Johansson. And we also met with key members of the Lake Wildwood committees and board presidents and Water Quality Committee and that kind of thing. It was a really informative tour, and it was just amazing to see that treatment plant. Good tour. And on June 7th, I attended the Ag Roundtable. Director Beerwagen and I met with the agricultural representatives, the Farm Bureau representatives, the county ag commissioners, and some key ranchers in the community to discuss what we our hardship and the drought situation. And so it was a very, very good meeting. And then last night I attended the Placer County Cattlemen's Association meeting, and so it was great to meet them. They didn't know we had declared a drought, so it reminded me we've got to get the word out that change is coming. We've got to up in our public relations game. But it was good to meet with them.
Thank you. Director Heck?
Yes. Well, let's see, I met with several folks from the ag community in my division and ended up appointing Jeremy Mignot, who we spoke super tuber, as my appointee to drought hardship. Wonderful, wonderful folks, all of these hardworking farmers, and I'm always impressed with how knowledgeable they are. And really appreciate Jeremy offered to be proactive in getting others, many of whom you've heard today, involved, so that we get a longer, broader voice of different segments of our ag community. So thank you, Jeremy, if you're still around. And let's see, I attended the rates committee with Director Beerwagen, and we went through with Chip, 2.5 hours of going through the various rate models, and that was very instructive, and I think there's a lot more work to do for the whole board on that. I met with Supervisor Hardy Bullock, who represents District 5 in Nevada County, and he had some concerns about Scotts Flat Lake, the traffic, the backup of getting into the wreck sites and how things were backed up. And then, of course, we all had gotten complaints from some of our constituents or residents there when the fire happened at Cashy. People were understandably very nervous, and so for those wanting to exit, the folks who were trying to come in to our campgrounds, anyway, it created this, what would you call it, traffic jam. And it really brought forward the need for NID to address how, in the event of emergencies, what are we going to do?
Excavators, yeah.
If we're going to have, 100 people in line going out into Scotts Flat Road, and there's a fire, and everybody needs to leave, that's their only egress. So I met with Supervisor Bullock, and we talked a little bit about that, and decided, Greg, on OES, county, it's really a county thing, but, NID plays a part. So there will be more to come on that, I imagine, with OES. And his other issue was, could NID ever be serving the town of Washington with water? And the answer is probably no, but Chip was amazing. Chip answered my questions, and I had like 3 or 4 questions. And actually, I got very educated on Canyon Creek and the water in the town of Washington. And they, of course, are concerned with the drought, that they might dry up and have no water. So that's very real for the town of Washington. And Supervisor Bullock was trying to figure out how we can all work together for that. So it was a good meeting. I learned a lot about the town of Washington and their water systems and so on. Lastly, I did participate in the county reopening, the COVID-19 reopening set of meetings. And it appears that the Board of Supervisors and other cities, the 2 cities are going to open to public participation in the chambers starting June 15th. And that will be something that this board will have to decide. There's CDC guidelines, there's all these different guidelines. But I know that the Board of Supervisors in the city of Grass Valley, I think, are opening up to having participants in the chambers. So that was interesting. That's it for me.
Thank you, Director Heck. Director Johansson.
Yeah, to segue on what Karen was talking about, the Colorado River, that area over there, up until now, the Colorado River has furnished enough water, and they put it in storage for about the last 20, 21 years. They're projecting next year, it's going to be the first year, they're going to say no to people that have been long-term customers, and Arizona is getting cut back quite a bit. Metropolitan has been taking quite a bit of water out of that system, and that could change a little bit, if not a lot. And now they're looking more towards Northern California. So we got to put that on the long-range planning. Also, the Lake Wildwood tour was, it was great. We were sitting there on top and right on time. Here was north of Collins Lake, a fire starts. And then we could see where the low fire had come through and almost taken out that water treatment plant. And Jones Fire was going this way, and then the 49er fire went on both sides. And they, Chip was saying, yeah, we had a guy hunkered in here. And Shad was going, man, I'd be in the water.
Mm-hmm.
Very vulnerable. So Lake Wildwood is writing a letter right now in support of the Backbone Extension Program, George, to Lake Wildwood water treatment. The Penn Valley Fire Department, same. Didn't get to Rough and Ready Fire Department last night because the fire, which I had right out the window, you could just take the binoculars and see all the activity. It was still a pretty good distance away, but it was right there. And and the Penn Valley Community Center, the MAC is, so everybody is understanding the importance of getting water into Rough and Ready and Penn Valley. So And then there's going to be looking at state funds, if we can get some of that for that. So the other thing is, yeah, things are dry. It takes so much longer to irrigate and to saturate the soil right now. And it's amazing how dry it is. So a lot of trees are dying also, a lot of oak trees.
Yeah.
It's sad.
It's sad.
Got beautiful trees. So, guess that's about it, huh?
Thank you, Director Johnson. So for my part, I've also participated in the roundtable. I thought it was made great progress there. The people that attended were all, but the takeaway is they're very much engaged and involved, not just saying, they're offering solutions and ideas about that. So that was the best part of that. It's a tough situation all the way around, as we've talked about this morning, but they're partnering with us, so that was good. And otherwise, I have nothing else to report at this time. Okay, next we'll take public comment on items to be considered in the closed session. We're going to closed session after this. If you would like to comment, members of the public, if you'd like to comment on those items in closed session, start on your phone. Last chance, if you'd like to comment on closed session items, start on your phone at this time. Okay. Seeing none, we will.
I anticipate that our readout will be something like direction given to legal counsel and real property negotiators, so no action.
Real property what?
Labor negotiators.
Labor negotiators.
Did I say real property negotiators?
Yeah, you did.
I just played into here, and I wasn't questioning what you said. Okay, well, now we will adjourn to recess, or whatever we do, go to closed session.
Great.
Let's open and close.
Yep.